Hello everyone! I haven't been on YouTube for a while, so this is my first one since I think last year. I have an update for everybody on how my off season's been going. To be honest, this recording is just going to be a little bit of an update video on my progress so far in off season, what some of my plans are going forward in the sport, and also I stuck up a Q&A on my Instagram and I got some questions, so I'm going to run through some of them as well. So I'm currently 30 weeks post show, and yeah, in the depths of off season in terms of what has happened in that time period. So back in January, my official off season started. So we are now 24 weeks into my official push up of food and I guess quest for new muscle. I'm going to be moving up a class for my competitions for next year. So my main goal at the moment is to just put on as much muscle as possible and make as much progress as I possibly can within the time frame that I have available. So I'm currently in the process of doing a 12-month off season, which is quite long for me. Like, I would have been definitely ready mentally to go back on prep this year, but my coach has obviously recommended not to do that and to just take the time to let my body recover. I dieted for a long time last year. It's just a case of letting my body recover. I've had some blood work done at the beginning of my push up in January, and I've had some blood work done more recently as well in May. So I'm gonna give you guys a little update on that to start off with. So coming into my push up phase, my bloods were a little bit off, mainly like hormones and thyroid, the kind of general stuff that you'd see post 11 months of dieting and obviously competing, which is quite extreme on the body. My main focus after my blood work in January was to bring my hormones into a more optimal range. So testosterone, progesterone, my thyroid, my TSH was working quite hard to try bring up my free T3 and 4 levels, which is just your thyroid. So your thyroid will slow down significantly when you've been dieting for long periods of time. So obviously I wanted to get that back into a good spot before even considering another diet, because it impacts your fat loss phase quite significantly, and get myself feeling healthier, looking healthier, have good blood work to reflect that. So overall, my second reading of bloods was very positive. Everything is back in an optimal and even more a range, which is fantastic. So long story short, I'm absolutely healthy at the moment. Training is going really well. My physique is progressing, and yeah, I suppose now at this point of my off season, I've got 6 months of hard pushing with high food under my belt now. I'm ready to move into a diet phase this year to pull back and just tidy up a little bit, really. So I'm going to give you some stats on where I'm at in comparison and some update on some pictures as well in this video to show you the progress that I've made so far from January, which was the start of my push-up, to now June. So 24 weeks of official off season. So starting back in January, my weight was 60.7 kg, which was about 10 kilos up from my stage weight. So over a 6, 7, 8 week period, my body weight went up about 10 kilos, which we purposefully did to get my body back healthy as quickly as possible after such a long dieting phase. So since then, my weight has gone up about on average 0.25 kilos per week. So I'm now sitting at on average 66 kgs, which is the heaviest I have ever been, guys. Like, it's mad. I can't believe it. My body fat is on the higher end. I'm well aware of that, but my body is one of those types that will sit on the naturally kind of higher body fat ends through any kind of a gaining phase, and even for me to lose body fat is just like quite difficult. Yeah, about 5.5 kg up across this gaining phase from January to now, which is pretty good. I mean, body fat has risen since then as well, but I'd like to think that a good chunk of that is new tissue. I mean, compared to my pictures, the picture on the left was back in January, picture on the right is now my current check-in physique from yesterday's update with Dan. So you can see the difference, really. And I guess we will really start to see what changes have been made once we move into this dieting phase. I'm about 4 weeks out from starting in a mini cut, which is what we call it when we're in off season and we need to implement a bit of a diet to just tidy up. I've had some questions about why you do this in off season and when to do this. So I'm going to come back to those a little bit later, but my off season mini cut should probably consist of between 8 to 10 weeks where I'm looking to pull off pretty much as much body fat as possible in that period of time, so that we can resensitize the body and move into a new push-up phase right up into the end of the year to kind of prepare myself for competing in 2024. So that's kind of in short where I'm at. Foods, calories are around 3,000 a day for training days, a little bit less on rest days, with about 400 free calories a day, which I have some flexibility. So I kind of eat what I want using those calories, which at the moment I've gotten to the point where I'm not really using them to eat like healthy food as much as what I was at the start of this gaining phase, because my hunger is just on the floor. I'm really full all the time, so it's a struggle at the moment. It's so hot as well, so I'm really struggling to eat the amount of food that I have, but I have been struggling with the food for quite a while now. So I think if it was up to me, I would have dieted earlier, but I'm glad that I've got Dan to kind of rein me in and say, no, you're fine, like just keep going. So I guess the main reason why I've waited until June, which is 24 weeks, well, it'll be 28 weeks of a push-up before dieting, because a lot of people probably would have dieted earlier than that, because I'm kind of thinking a little bit more in the long term. So I've got, I'd say after the 10-week diet, so let's say we start in towards the end of July, I'll still be dieting end of September, so I'll have October, November, December. I'll only have 3 months really to try and keep a better body composition whilst pushing food back up. And knowing me and my previous kind of reverses, I think it's wiser for me to keep a smaller period of time between my diet and my next competition, so that I can actually keep a better body composition. Some people will diet earlier, but the thing is you can't diet too early, because then you've got to try and keep your body fat off for a longer period after you finish the diet. So you do need to be quite strategic in the way that you actually implement a mini cut when you're in an off season. Some people don't even do a mini cut on off season if they've only got a short off season, like 6 months. For me, a 12-month off season, putting the mini cut in a little bit later in the year is strategically a better plan for me, because it means that, yeah, I will be in a better position going into my next prep. What we need to bring differently for next year is obviously more condition, moving up a class, more muscularity, more condition. So because of that, I need to start my prep leaner than what I did the last time, which I'm very confident that we will. Looking at where I'm at now with my food, how high my food is, I haven't done any cardio since last year, so over 6 months without cardio. My steps are 10k currently, which I'm hitting pretty consistently. Off plan meals, I'm having like 1 to 2 a week at the moment. So I mean, as soon as they drop out, free calories drop out and cardio is in, I'm expecting my body to respond well. This is the most consistent I have ever been in a gaining phase, and it's been a real struggle, like I won't lie. You definitely need to have a pair of balls for a proper push of an off season, especially when you're seeing a lot of people who you know who compete dieting around you, because you are the only one who's like the fat one, which obviously I know I'm not fat, but like I feel really heavy and lethargic. My body fat is pretty much at its peak, what I would want it to be for competitive purposes. So that's kind of where we're at with the off season, guys. Not a whole lot else has changed. Like food, I've had 2 food increases since January. Calories are sat where they are now, as I mentioned previously, and I would say they won't change between now and my mini cut. Once I start my mini cut, I'm going to give you guys another update on, I guess, what we're going to implement to pull off as much body fat as we can in an 8 to 10 week period. And then, yeah, I'll update you then. So that's it for the update on the off season. I've got some Q&As to run through as well from Instagram, so I'm going to do that shortly. But today is a training day, so I'm doing legs today. So I'm going to get my pre in now, and then I'm going to come back and answer some of your questions. So I think a lot of people think that in off season that means that you just can eat whatever you want, just because you're not on prep anymore and I'm not dieting, but like the difference between making progress in off season and not is your food, really. Like, are you able to push foods? Are you able to do that consistently, but also with as much accuracy as possible? So obviously I've got a little bit more freedom in my meals, but I still need to hit my basics. So even on days when I do not want to eat, like I'm absolutely stuffed to the brim, I'm actually still eating, like on top of that, even when I feel physically sick. That is the main difference. And these are the things that make the difference. There's no point in being 100% on your prep and then as soon as you get into off season, like you just stop weighing stuff, you stop eating consistently. Like I've been eating the same food plan since I started with Dan in 2021, but I've obviously just added more food to it. So now I'm eating more, like higher amounts of food, but my actual staple foods plan has not changed in a year and a half. That's saying something. Like, you don't need to chop and change your plan all the time just because you get bored. As long as you like the food on your plan, like the grass always seems greener. Like you might think, oh, what if I was eating this and that, but if it works, just don't fucking change it. So I've got 100 grams of banana going in on 50 grams of oats and 25 grams of protein, 20 grams of dark chocolate, sea salt, and I'm going to put 100 grams of berries on top. 101 grams. I think we can allow for 1 gram off season. And also I'm going to add in Biscoff because 3 calories and I don't know where else to put them because I'm not hungry. So I've been putting 15 grams of Biscoff in my pre-workout meal. It takes me a while to digest this meal. I mean, it's about 650 calories. So it is heavy, and in this heat, I'm struggling, but someone's got to do it. So you might be wondering why I'm putting this on my oats, pink salt, because I'm going to train and I need to make sure that I can get a good pump in the gym. With this weather at the moment, you're sweating a lot more, so you're losing salt. You have to make sure you're putting salt, extra salt into your diet when it's extra hot. I always put salt on my oats anyway. I don't actually weigh my salt, I just do like number of turns. But for me, one of the best pre-workout meals that you can possibly eat contains salt, banana for potassium, and those two things together and water, they give the sickest pump. No joke, it took me about fucking 30 minutes to eat that meal. So hard. Anyway, pre-workout meals in, so while I'm letting that digest before I get ready for the gym, I'm going to go through some of the Instagram questions that I got. I only put it up this morning and it's 2 o'clock, so I haven't waited all day for people to send them through, but I've gotten enough, so I'm just going to run through the ones that I've gotten already. I haven't like planned the answers for them or anything, so I'm just going to answer them as I open them up. So there. Alright, so I've gotten a few come through, so I'm going to start with, first question I got is regarding other coaches. So the question is, should a coach always give out a good plan? I think he means food plan, or just MyFitnessPal. So it really depends on what kind of coach that you have. So in my opinion, online coaches, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for them to pay very like high attention to your diet and your food. So what you're consuming is super important, quite a lot more important than say a personal trainer, because a personal trainer is getting paid by the hour to train you for that 1 hour, and a lot of the time they charge for that and that's all. So if they're only giving you MyFitnessPal and telling you to go and track your own food, I think that's fair enough, unless you're paying them additionally. However, with an online coach, I don't think that that's an acceptable thing to expect your clients to track their own food. I do have a couple of clients who do prefer if it fits your macros, and I normally advise them to try and do a food plan, because I personally find that that is a better way of doing it for me, and it's worked well for me, especially when dieting. But if they have good knowledge around tracking, I think that it's an absolutely fine thing to do. But at the very bare minimum, give you macros and a calorie target, and also some kind of an indication as to like your meal timings and what you should be doing with your macros in each of those meals. So yeah, question number 2 is about, so how soon into off season do you think it's okay to diet, and what point do you know when? So yeah, I read this one earlier on a little bit. So this is going to vary person to person. Some people will have to diet earlier than others. If you've messed up your reverse and you've gained a heap of body fat coming out of the back of a prep, you're probably going to have to diet a lot earlier than someone who has steadily been gaining like week on week on week and in a more controlled fashion. It just varies person to person. Like for me, you know how long I've waited to diet. Could I have dieted a bit earlier? Yes, but I mean, I would have only been doing it from my own head. I don't think physically body fat is higher, but still had room to push. So it just depends. I would say personally, it depends on how long you prepped before as well. Say if you've done a normal prep of like between 12 and 20 weeks or whatever that might be, I would say you could get away with dieting a little earlier into your off season, because your body doesn't have to recover quite so long. If you've done a longer prep or you've done 2 seasons in 1 year, then I think you should definitely give your body the same amount of time that you've dieted off, in my opinion. So if you've dieted for 6 months, you should do a minimum of 6 months off. I think that's a pretty easy way of doing it. Unless body fat gets completely out of hand, I think that that's a good kind of structure to follow. How do you know when? Well, looking out for different kind of signs of like bulking fatigue. So digestion being one, hunger, adherence, quality of your training sessions, body fat obviously as well. So is your hunger completely non-existent to the point where you're not able to push anymore and continue progressing? I guess when you've reached a point where you're not able to make any more progress for whatever reason, that's a good time to implement a diet. So if body fat is too high, so you're gaining too much fat versus muscle, then that's the time to diet. If you are not progressing anymore in the gym because you're feeling too heavy and lethargic and unfit, another time to diet. There's a few different reasons that I would kind of look for signs and then go with it. But I think the best thing to do is have a coach who can see you objectively, and don't just look at yourself and think, I look fat, I need to diet, because most of the time you're absolutely fine. So next question is, best piece of advice you could give to a first timer. This is a hard one because there's so much advice I'd love to give a first timer, but I think the most important thing for a first timer is having the right coach. I don't think anything else is quite as important, because they will be the difference between you continuing bodybuilding after your first show or hating it and never wanting to do it again. And I think that's the most important thing about it, is having a good experience. I remember my first coach, it was before I was with Dan. When I started with him, he told me the most important thing that you need to take out of this prep is enjoyment, because if you absolutely hate every single second of it, you're not going to come out having a good experience. And I took that with me, and I'm not saying that you should have an easy prep. I think that it's quite important to embrace the fact that you are going to suffer a little bit, but don't expect to suffer to the point where you hate it so much that you'll never want to do it. Because I just ran out of storage halfway through that reply to that question. But yeah, so I think that is the most important thing. Have a really, really good coach and just enjoy it. That is, like, don't be going into your first prep expecting to win and go pro. Like, just get that out of your head. I competed, my first show I ever did, dead last. Second year I competed, I placed 4th. And that was my first time ever placing. Come back and made significant changes, obviously invested in a really good coach, and well, you know, like obviously how last year went for me. So it's worth just enjoying the process. If you don't enjoy the process, why are you even doing bodybuilding? Another question is, how do you stop comparing yourself to others? So one of the biggest lessons that I learned on my bodybuilding journey last year competing is people look nothing like a picture. So you're wasting your own time and energy looking at what other people who you're competing against look like in comparison to you. Because I remember vividly looking at people's pictures on prep and thinking, there's no way I'm going to beat them. They're way better than me. They look so much leaner, bigger, better shape, everything. And then as soon as I got up on the stage and in the lineup, it was a win for me. So I don't think pictures do anything. There is literally no point worrying about that. So just take that on board. Just stop looking at other people's pictures because they mean absolutely fuck all. Like, so just focus on yourself, and even if someone does look better in a picture, their stage presence might not be as good as yours. They're posing. There's a lot of different things that go into bodybuilding. It's not about who's the leanest. People make the mistake of looking at other people and thinking, oh my god, I'm not as lean as them, I'm not going to win. I've beaten people leaner than me. It's not about that. It's about the overall package. So just try not to get distracted by that bullshit. Focus on yourself, and that is the most important thing. Another question is, what are my plans, prep and shows, etc. I'm gonna update you guys like later on in the year with regards to specifics on what shows I'm planning on doing, but you already know I'm competing next year, so I hope to start prep start of 2024. So I would love to be able to stay off season and compete the end of the year next year, because I think that there's more bigger shows, like you've got the British finals and the World Championships towards the back of the year, but I just don't think I want to wait that long. I've already done 12 months off season, so it's like you need to get up on stage and keep getting feedback in order to improve. There's no point in staying in off season forever because you don't know where you stand. Like, people do this, make the mistake of going off season for years and then come back and they're like, oh my god, I'm way off what I need to be. So it is an important thing that you do need to still play the game, get in there, compete, get up on stage as much as possible. So yeah, that's as much as I'm going to share with you at the minute, but we'll get to that. And another one is just a couple more and then I'll leave it with you. So if you couldn't bodybuild anymore, not just competing, what would you do instead? So I'm assuming you just mean training with weights in general. I would be doing some other kind of a sport, or I've always loved horses, so I would be doing horse riding very consistently. I would need something to structure myself with, kind of feed that energy into. Like, without that in my life, for me, I've got no structure or purpose, so I need that something. Otherwise it's a slippery slope for me, because I just end up getting lazy and I just don't want to live a life where I'm not doing something good. So I would have to do something. Like, last question. So what has been the best lesson that bodybuilding has given you? I love this question. Again, there's so many different things that bodybuilding has given me, especially last year. But ultimately, I think, as cheesy as it sounds, the biggest thing that bodybuilding has given me is just confidence. I never really had that much confidence in myself, and like, I didn't think I would be able to win anything. So I've always been a very competitive person, but I never put myself up there as being able to be one of the best. And I think, not saying that I am, but I mean, last year I proved to myself that I was the best last year out of the people who I competed against. So that for me was just something that will be with me forever, not to ever doubt myself. And I think that that's something that I'm taking going into my next season, is a little bit more confidence in myself. Last year I went into my last season with absolutely no expectations. Next year I'm going into my next season with that behind me, and I think that that's going to be an interesting thing to have, because I'm going to approach the prep very differently in my head. So there we go, guys, that's pretty much it. So that's it for today on the video. I don't want to drag it out too long, but we'll be back with another update very soon, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.